The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the first of the series for Lunch and Learn. I just want to make sure that I'm being heard. That's the very first thing that we need to establish. And what I need you to do is, if you have a look on the question box over on the right-hand side, if you click on the little link, open it up and just type in the word clear. Could you do that for me, please? And that will let me know that I'm actually coming across loud and clear, because I'm not sure that I am. Could you just do that for me, please? Okay, thanks, Saren. Welcome. Nice to see you, or not really seeing you, but good to have you on board. Anyone else? Thanks, Sue. That's good to know. Welcome, Sue. Anyone else from Lockyer Valley Regional Council? Could you just type in clear? That would be great. That will help me a lot. All right. Look, I think we'll just get going. I unfortunately can't get the webcam up at the moment, which thanks, John. Welcome, John. I can't get the webcam up at the moment, so we'll just launch ahead. And normally I'd have the webcam on here as well, so that you can see me and realize that I'm not a robot or something talking to you. So welcome. We've got several other people coming into the webinar now. Thanks, Dan. Good to see you again, or good to hear from you again, at least, Dan. Welcome. Okay. All right. Now, couple of logistics so that we're clear about how this all works. What happens is that the email that I sent you, which obviously you've linked into because you've clicked on the first unit, can you make sure that you click on all the units? And if you click on all the units, it'll mean that you'll get the automated responses. It means that you can put them in your diary. It means that you can receive updates and so on. And so what I'm going to do at the end of this webinar, and not today, but it'll be probably on Monday at this stage, I'll be sending you another email out, and it'll have the other 5 units in the Lunch and Learn series. So just take a little bit of time, go through each of those particular units, just click on the links, type your name in and your email address, and you're done. Unfortunately, there isn't a facility where you can just register for all 6 at once. You have to do it 6 times. I guess that's my point. Thanks, Nick. Good to hear from you. Welcome. So that would be great. And then what happens is that you will receive a copy of these slides on Monday, and you'll also receive a copy of the recording as well. So the idea is that you get a recording and slides. So I know that some of you, for example, can't make it on Friday, or you'll have other things on throughout the series. And if that's the case, then don't panic. All you've still got to register though, but what will happen is you'll get the slides and recording, and you'll be able to view the recording at your own time. So that's how that works. Okay. So it is important that you click on all 6 links. All right, so the next email you'll get from me is Monday with the slides and the recording. So welcome everybody. I'm looking forward to working with you over the next 6, well, actually it'll be 12 weeks over 6 units. There's one every fortnight. And we've spaced them just far enough for you not to forget what we were previously talking about, but not too far, not too close together that it's weekly. All right, so this is, let me just run through the program with you. So on your screen right now, you will see, there it is, just disappears every now and again. You can see that there are 6 units. Now this is an executive program. So I'm going to be reasonably high level and strategic in all of these topics. And of course, I've labelled it as an executive program. But today we're going to look at strategically managing performance. So we're going to look at performance from a strategic perspective today, and I'm going to throw a number of different ideas and concepts at you, which I think you might find very useful. You can participate in these webinars too, because where you clicked in clear, you can actually type in your question. So you type in a question, and you do that at any time during the broadcast. So what that means is, of course, I will see it. I'm the only one that actually gets to see your question. And when I see it, I'll respond to it. So I'm encouraging you to participate by using that question box over on the right-hand side. So please do that, and then I'll respond to that as soon as I see it, because it'll probably be quite important and relevant to the point I'm making at the time. So please do that, and that'll be great. All right, so in Unit 2, I'm going to get you to do a diagnostic. So you will receive an Influencing Capabilities profile link for Unit 2, and I need you to complete that, because what will happen in Unit 2 is that I will give you a debrief basically about your profile. And what it will show you is how you like to influence other people. And of course, you're in the business of influence, as we all are. And the idea is to, of course, build up your low scores, but you get a 14-page report which you can download instantly before you actually come to the second unit. But what I will do in the second unit is give you some, I'll give you some pointers about how all that works. In Unit 3, we'll look at creating thinking time. Now, you're all busy people, and so am I, and in fact, the world just seems to be absolutely frantic, doesn't it? We're getting bombarded with information from everywhere, and it's not just via email anymore, it's from everywhere. And as an executive leader, you've got to create thinking time for yourself, because if you don't create thinking time, you'll be in a situation where you're just getting bombarded with information. So I really want to talk to you about how you might do that and how you might manage your priorities around your thinking time. Arguably, you're in the business of thinking, and so therefore you need time to think. And of course, look, a very simple example. We often go from meetings back to back. We finish one meeting, we're moving into the next meeting. Now, that's not an ideal scenario. And the reason it's not an ideal scenario is that we're not ready for the next meeting, really. Psychologically, we're not ready because we haven't readjusted ourselves. So we need to create a little buffer, perhaps, where meetings occur, and try not to make them back to back, so that you can at least think about what you're trying to get out of that meeting and what you can achieve. So that's what we're covering in Unit 3. In Unit 4, we're going to look at options for organisational structuring. And because you're all from local government, there's probably some sort of impediments around how you might be able to structure or restructure your organisation. But I just want to give you some thoughts about how you do that. Of course, local government's very siloed, and because it's very siloed, communication can often be stifled between various functions. And we need to talk about that and how you might be able to bridge the gap between various functional, aspects of the organisation. So we're going to do some discussion on that in Unit 4. In Unit 5, we're going to look at negotiation and conflict management. And again, I'm going to get you to do a diagnostic. This one will be a paper one, whereas the one in Unit 2 will be an electronic one. Now, this will give you a chance to look at how you like to deal with conflict and negotiation, because at your level, a lot of information is around conflict and negotiation. So you need to get good at that. And the first thing we need to do in order to get good at that is to understand how we like to do that. So we'll actually have a look at that. And then for Unit 6, we'll look at driving positive culture. So how do you create culture in your department? How do you create and of course, organisations, all councils have their own culture. But within your own sphere of influence within the organisation, you can also create a culture that's productive. And so what I'm going to do in Unit 6 is give you some tips and hints on how you might do that. All right, so that's pretty much where we're going. So I hope you enjoy the program. I'm sure you will. You'll find there'll be lots of insightful and very unique perspectives that I will share with you that you won't necessarily find in any textbooks or anywhere else. And I'm doing that on purpose because you're at a reasonably senior level, and so giving you a unique insight is probably what you've joined up or signed up for. All right, so let's get underway. Today we're going to be looking at strategically managing performance. So we're going to look at that topic, and so just relax. As I said, you'll get the slides later. You'll get the recording later, so you just have to relax and enjoy the presentation. And by all means, at any time, just type in a question. If you've got a question for me that you'd like me to respond to, I'm more than happy to do that. So, if we look at what we're covering today, we're going to be, that's a bit, all right, so we're going to look at a performance management framework that I put together a number of years ago, and we just need to understand how this whole thing locks together. How does performance work? Where does your roles and responsibilities start and end? And give you a little bit. The framework itself is not terribly unique, but it is important that we understand exactly how we fit in. I'm not a huge believer in job descriptions. Obviously, we need to give people a document to work from, and we call that a job description. But the problem with job descriptions, of course, is it doesn't cover non-job performance. Now, non-job performance is critically important to success in councils or anywhere else. So non-job performance covers things like being a team player, to continually develop and grow as an individual and as a person who is technically proficient. A lot of these things aren't included in the work document, and I just want to challenge your thinking around some of that so that you might like to consider that internally if you've got the opportunity to do that. And I want to finish up talking about performance development conversations, because to me, there's no other way that I know that you can improve performance than having a conversation with the person or persons that you need to have a conversation with. You can't manage performance via email. You can't do it by text. You really have to do it one-on-one. You can't even do it in your regular catch-up meetings with your team. You really have to do it one-on-one. And so the challenge for you will be to start to look at developing some one-on-one meetings with your key people, your direct reports, and that becomes really important because that's the way that you manage performance on a regular, day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis. So we'll talk about that as well. All right. So this will come up on your screen very soon. Still taking some time. Okay, here it comes. Good. There it is. Oop, gone again. There it is. Now, let's just understand the key attributes of the framework and just think about how this operates. Now, obviously, you've got a corporate plan that legally you've got to have a corporate plan, and some of these labels don't talk about corporate planning, but you can see that they would fit in very well with what you do at council. So you've got at the top of the apex, you've got a vision, which is basically a statement of where the organisation is intending to head. The latest the latest thinking on this is that we change vision statement to performance statements, whatever we want to call it. It's pretty much where we're intending to head. And the mission statement is how we will get there. And of course, it depends on what book you read, but you will find that I think ideally the mission statement should be how we will achieve our vision. Then all councils have their own set of values, and I often think that lots of organisations have too many. I think you should just try and, if you can, cut that down to about 4. I think there's too many. Anything above 6 is too many because people, 1, won't remember them, and 2, won't value them. So it's important that you have a set of values, and the values are the way behaviour is governed towards achieving the vision. And then, of course, you've got goals. You've got 5-year goals, and those 5-year goals are pretty much around clusters of activity. So I suppose from a council perspective, we're really talking there about a corporate plan. All right, so you've got your corporate plan. And then when we get down to number 5, we're really now starting to move into an operational plan, which I know you've also got. And of course, the operational plan must lock in directly with the corporate plan. So you've got some objectives that need to be achieved, and normally they're over a 12-month period. You've got some strategies that will help you achieve those objectives, and you've got some core or key accountabilities around who will be responsible for what. So that becomes what we would refer in local government land as an operational plan. And then the last 2 there on the pyramid, that's number 8 and number 9, a position or job description and a performance appraisal, really are about monitoring and making sure that people are sticking to the key things that they need to do. So that's just a big overview of how it all should work together. So everything should flow from one to the other. There should be no gaps. There should be no inconsistencies. Everything should be locked into place. And you could do a lot worse than go back and review your corporate operational planning and your job descriptions and making sure they all link together. That's hard work because it requires a lot of time, energy and effort. But obviously, if you haven't got all of that sorted out, it's obviously going to affect negatively performance. And of course, the opposite if you've got it all working for you. So any questions or comments at this stage, folks, type them in the question box. But while you're thinking about that, I'll keep moving through the presentation. So I'm going to pick up some key points around what I just shared with you. And the first thing I want to say is to use an analogy that a vision statement is like a coat hanger. Now, you go into your cupboard at home and you've probably got more coat hangers than you need. Most of us do. And in fact, a lot of us will find them quite a nuisance at times because we've got so many in the cupboard. But if you actually think about it, the coat hanger on its own is useless. It's not really terribly effective and can be just taking up room in a cupboard. But obviously the coat hanger allows us to hang, a shirt or, some sort of garment from it. And that's the key reason we have coat hangers, to shape a garment. And so it's the same thing, of course, with a vision statement in an organisation. The vision statement is on its own just words, really means very little, but the words themselves should shape the behaviour of the organisation. So everything that's thought, said and done should actually be related to the coat hanger. It should be shaped by the vision. So that's a little way of looking at the vision statement. It is important in the sense that we should be looking at everything through the prism of our vision statement. So, I don't know what your vision statements are, but there's a couple of things that they should be, and I just want to talk a little bit about that before I move through the pyramid and talk about some other key points. Now, one of the things that a vision statement needs to do is it needs to be reasonably inspiring. Now, to serve the community, whilst, it's probably accurate, it doesn't really inspire me too much to sort of say, well, we should be serving the community. It needs to be inspirational. Why? Because we want people to attach themselves, if you like, to that coat hanger or that vision. So that's very important. It should also state what our priorities are. And I find that vision statements will often be too long. One simple sentence is enough. In fact, if you can't articulate a vision statement in one sentence, it's problematic because you haven't got some clarity around what it is. It should remind us of who our customers are, and of course in local government you know who your customers are, and so it really should have some attachment, if you like, to who your customers are. And it should also give you some direction about where you're going and where you're heading. So obviously that's what a vision statement is attempting to do, all of those things, and they become really important that we get all of that right. So it's probably not practical for you to go back and revisit your vision statement, but at some stage it's probably not a bad idea. Does it cover all of those criteria, for example? Or are there anything missing? Is there, are there things that we need to include? Now, if we look at the strategic aspect of performance, we need to look at it from this perspective, and we need to be able to ask ourselves these questions. Where does our organisation want to be in 5 years, which is our vision statement? What are the values that will enable us to achieve our vision? So what are the core values that are critically important in our organisation to achieve that vision? The mission statement asks the question, how will we achieve our vision? So this is the how to. And then the 5-year goals are, what are our broad goals for the next 5 years? So those questions in your mind as an executive manager are critically important. You need to be very crystal clear about what they are. You need to be able to assess performance based on that information. And if you need to be sticking very clearly to that particular set of questions as you go through your normal day and normal program. Okay, moving right along. Now, one of the things that, and I know some of you would be aware of this work that I've done previously, but one of the things I want us to realise is that in local government, culture's changing. In fact, culture's changing everywhere. And what we need to do is we need to understand that the most critically important aspect of what you do is managing a changing employment relationship. So what you're really trying to do is to shift the organisation from the left to the right. Now, what you can see on the left is 8 old values. These are values that have very much been part of the workplace for the last 200 years. But we need to move on from those. And of course, your job in local government is critically important to that. So the new values that are on the right-hand side are the new values that local government needs in order to be effective for the 21st century. And what probably is the case is that as I go through these, you might like to think about how closely aligned your organisation is to the values on the left or the values on the right. You might actually find that you're in flux between the old and the new. And so the question then is, what can you do to move from the old to the new? Now, these values are not just the values that you hold as a manager. These values are the values that are held also by the people that you lead. So when you look at the employment relationship, it's a comprehensive relationship that includes everyone in the organisation. So it's quite possible, for example, that you embrace the values that are on the right-hand side as a director, but you might actually find that there are people that you lead who embrace some of the values on the left-hand side. And of course, that can be a source of frustration. Vice versa, you could have a attachment to some values on the left-hand side, but some of your employees, particularly the younger ones, may have values that are on the right-hand side, and that'll be a source of frustration for you as well, not to mention the people that you lead. So the critically important thing is to try to align people's values, and those 8 values, which I have researched and know are critically important to success in the 21st century. So flexible, specialised employment means that people have got a narrow sort of functional specialisation, and will, of course, local governments set up very much around that, where we have various functional departments and so on. But what we need to be able to do is to flexibly deploy those skills in different situations. Community expectations are changing, new programs are being implemented, new directions are being put forward, new priorities and so all that means is that we've now got to be able to deploy our specialisation in a range of different ways. So for example, if you're an engineer, there will be various projects that you will be involved in that will require and test you to think differently. And that means you've got to flexibly deploy your specialisation, which would be, in this case, engineering. Internal focus. Local government has for too long been too focused on the internal, quality assurance, making sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed. That's still important because obviously you're working in a regulatory environment. But everything that's said, done and thought about should actually have the customer in mind. And so, it's important for you to develop this culture of outward thinking, outward looking. And that's one of the reasons, of course, that we get people in the community to be involved in our corporate planning process. But we need to be in tune and in touch, and everything we say, think and do must have the customer in mind, if that makes sense. So the old thinking was the focus on the job. So as long as I fulfill the requirements of my job description, the world is fine, but it's not, because we've actually got to start thinking around performance. Performance and job don't necessarily mean the same thing. So we've really got to get people to be more performance focused rather than focused on the job. Functional based work means working in your silo, but now, of course, more and more in local government, we have project-based work where a number of different departments or functional areas would be involved, and that's critically important. So we need to start to be a little bit more project-based rather than functionally based. And the human spirit and work, obviously we're all trying very hard to become focused on the, engaging people, getting people's hearts and minds involved in the process. We just got a question here from Nick. Why do younger ones have values on the right-hand side? What did you mean by that? Yeah, thanks, Nick. Look, the employment relationship is changing profoundly, and I shouldn't generalise and say that younger employees would necessarily embrace the values on the right-hand side, but it's often the case. You'll often find a clash between a baby boomer executive and a younger employee, and it's often can be explained through a different set of values about how things happen. But look, I am generalising a bit there, but at the end of the day, if you look at your star performance in your organisation, if you think about who who is really performing some of those direct reports that are reporting to you, I will guarantee to you that they will be embracing what's on the right-hand side, not what's on the left-hand side. And I guess that's my point, and that could happen at any age. So, Nick, thanks for the question. It was just, I made a bit of a generalisation there, but I think millennials, their values, of course, as they come into the workplace are changing. And we all know that local government's got an issue in terms of getting younger people into local government, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And not for any other reason, also to actually start to change some of the values of an organisation. So we want people to be engaged, human disparate to human spirit. Loyalty is a great thing, but the problem with loyalty is that when people are loyal, they will often defend the status quo. And we've actually got to get people to not necessarily defend the status quo, but to start to look at new, better, faster and easier ways of delivering the services to the community. And in order to do that, loyalty is not necessarily a great attribute. We actually want people to be committed, and committed is a different set of values to loyalty. All right, so committed means that, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. It's a transactional type of process. So we want people who are committed rather than loyal. I mean, if you've got someone that was loyal and committed, that's great, but they're not exactly the same thing. And of course, we send people off to training, but we actually should be starting to think about learning and development as a far broader concept than just having people sitting in a room. I guess this is an example of what we're doing today, this Lunch and Learn series. We've got to look at different ways. We've got to look at coaching internally. We've got to look at mentoring. We've got to explain things to people and use our team meetings to do that. That's all learning and development, rather than sending people off to formal courses. I'm not suggesting we don't have formal courses. It's just that we need to broaden it to include much more wider understanding of what learning and development is. Closed information, you'll get told on a need-to-know basis. We need to give that up by having this idea that no news is good news, or you'll get told on a need-to-know basis. The problem with that, of course, is that people don't have the same perspective as you as an executive. And what that means is they can't think like you if they don't have the same information. And if they don't think like you, it probably means that they're not seeing the full picture. So when in doubt, the idea is that we need to share information with people. Now, obviously, there are a few things that are confidential. We understand that. But by and large, I think we could be doing a lot more in terms of sharing information. And that becomes the critically important point there. So there's 8 values. That's another framework that you can use to start looking at your own organisation, and maybe you can even have a conversation with some of your team members about where they see themselves, not personally, but pretty much in your department or your functional area. Do they see themselves as a department or functional area on the left-hand side, or do they see themselves on the right-hand side? So you might want to give that some thought and see how you go with that. Now, one of the things and this is coming up on your screen now, it's a provocative statement, but I do believe it, and I think it's very important that we understand this. And I'll just read it out because it can on the surface be quite provocative. The roles people play in organisations are more important than the jobs they do. All right, the roles people play in organisations are more important than the jobs they do. Just have a think about that for a moment. John's asking, Tim, we share so much information now that enough information is never enough. People are always saying that they don't receive the information. Yeah, John, I accept that. We get 200 emails a day and we get all sorts of information bombarded from all sorts of places. And I think the key thing is about being selective about the information, and what do people need to know in order to do the maximum performance in their job is the key. So you've got to think and you've got to think about ways of conveying that information. Now, email's not all that flash hot, to be honest, because if you're going through 200 emails and there's a key email in there, it's quite likely it'll be lost in all the clutter. So we've got to think, well, what are we conveying in team meetings? What are your team conveying to you? You just need to really start to make sure that people are open and they understand. And I think what I'm really talking about is they understand the rationale for why a decision's been made. What is the purpose of this? What's council's perspective on this? How is this impacting on our work? What do we need to do different? What do we need to do faster? What do we need to do better? All of those questions are the key types of information from a performance perspective I'm talking about. So, John, I think I'm talking pretty much around performance here, performance information to help people to actually excel in their job and their role. I think what is implicit in your question is that, yes, the employee or the person on the receiving end of the information has a responsibility to get the information as well. So they have a responsibility to know what's going on, and we need to be able to, at once, you can communicate information to people, but they've got to also receive it in the way it's intended. And I understand that's an issue, but we don't want to be criticised for not sharing information. I think that's my key point, because frankly, people need to know what's going on. And if there's nothing going on, they need to know that too. They need to understand if there's no information, then there's no information. That in itself is information that will help people to understand the situation. All right, so thanks, John, for the feedback. So getting back to this question around roles, if I say that roles people play in organisations are more important than the jobs they do, have a look at this. I'm going to share with you a model that came out of one of my books, and it's a simple model, but I hope it makes a lot of sense to you. So let's think about the work that people do. The work people do is two-dimensional. So the work people do, there is obviously a job role. So people are required to do something, which is their technical expertise. So obviously that's covered in the job description. And, that's really quite important to performance, of course. But the most important thing here I want to share with you is another dimension of performance that's often left by the wayside. Have a think about this. The other dimension is the non-job roles people perform. Now, the truth of the matter is these non-job roles will make or break your department or functional area. And have a think about them. In fact, this is not new in the sense that non-job roles, the whole concept's been around for about 20 years. And people have been procrastinating on this because they're concerned that they can't find some generalized roles that fit all industries. So I thought I'd have a crack at this, and I came up with 4. And I challenge you to to suggest that these aren't important in the work that people do in your sphere of influence. The first non-job role is having a positive attitude and enthusiasm. Now, I don't expect people coming to work bouncing off the walls. I don't expect that, and nor would you, I don't doubt. But I certainly don't expect people coming to work backbiting, finger pointing, blame, undermining. Those sorts of behaviours will completely destroy and sabotage your team. So I think it's fair and reasonable that we expect that people will play a positive attitude and enthusiasm role in the workplace. But the problem with that is that it's not necessarily written down in the job description. And because it's not written down in the job description, then people actually don't think it's all that important. But you and I both know it's critically important. And of course, then you feel reluctant pulling someone up about their rotten attitude because, one, how can you be objective about it? And two, It's never been mentioned before. It's sort of implicit. And I've actually had people say to me, look, being a pain, I know I'm a pain in the ass, but there's nothing in the job description that says that I need to be anything else. And frankly, I get my work done. You know, that could be a response that someone could make, which I think just doesn't fly, because you could be working very hard to engage your direct reports, and it only takes one person to sabotage the whole setup. So we need to have conversations with people about their attitude. And I really think it's not that hard to do. I mean, obviously, if you raised with someone that they had a poor attitude, well, it's probably not going to go over very well, and it probably won't end very well either. But if you said to the person, look, the last three contributions you've made in team meetings have been negative, and then give some examples, and then talk to them about the impact that's having on other people in the team, that's the way you go about it, not to just talk about a rotten attitude, because that'll not do much except get their back up, and that's probably why we don't do it. The second non-job role is the team role. Now, the team role is, we expect people to be team players, don't we? I mean, I do. I expect people to operate in teams. I don't expect them to be best mates all the time, but I do expect them to be operating in a team environment. Now, you should too, but I've also had people say to me, oh, look, I'm not really a team player. I just come to work, do my job. I'm not really interested in being a team player, and so forth. Well, that to me is just unacceptable. We have to work in teams. So again, having conversations with people around the team role is critically important. Thirdly, we want people to come to work and continually to develop their skills and upgrade their qualifications and so forth. I don't necessarily mean formally, but they, you know, again, we have people who come to work saying, oh, look, I'm too old to learn, or don't send me on that program, or, you know, I've been used to doing things this way for so long, I don't want to change. Well, they're sabotaging their own potential for promotion, and they're also sabotaging your potential to get high performance if they're not willing to change. So that again, I think, is unacceptable. So while skill development is about the individual, the last one here is innovation and continuous improvement. I expect people to bring their brains to work and not leave them in a paper bag at the door. And I expect them to come up with ways and means of making the organisation more efficient and effective. I expect that. I'll ask for that. You should ask for that. And frankly, if you know, it's not just your job. I think some people actually think that it's only your job, and that's what you get paid to do. You actually get paid to facilitate innovation and continuous improvement. So it's all about getting ideas, thoughts, and so forth from people. So those four are critically important, and I want you to have a think about how you might be able to have more conversations around those four things, because if you're really serious, and this is about strategic performance, if you're really serious about strategic performance, and I know you are, then you've got to have conversations around the non-job role dimension and not just stick to the job role, because that's only half the deal. So I just want to make people aware that at your level, you can change the perception of what performance is by embracing the non-job roles. Now, if you are in any doubt about this, here's a survey that was done in 2012 by Warner, and it simply asked the question, what is the most valued job attributes that people can bring to a job? Right? So there was a lot of people involved in this survey, and if you cast your eyes down that list, I don't see any job role there. They are all non-job roles. So I'm just making the point that all of us actually do value highly, in fact, even more highly, the non-job roles that people bring to work. And we expect that people will have the skills to be able to do the job role. But the bottom line is, it's these things that make all the difference. So if we're really interested in performance, we've got to start looking at the non-job roles in our organisation. Saren's asking, how do you put them into a PD or interview them when employing someone? I tend to go gut feel on how someone will fit into my team when employing. Good question, Saren. I think personally you should move from job descriptions to role descriptions. Now, what that means is that you have, 5 roles: a job role, which is already there in the job description, and hopefully if it's written well, it doesn't need to change, and 4 non-job roles. So you actually tack on to the work document those 4 non-job roles, and you actually tease out what they actually mean around key performance indicators. And you can do that. I've done it in my book, The End of the Job Description, and you actually do that by consulting with other people. And by doing that, you get some buy-in and you end up with a document that's far more comprehensive. So it's not as difficult as it might seem. You just tack on, and sometimes in the job description it just has a few bullet points at the end around some of these things that are on the screen. But the clear implication to the person that's got that job description is these things aren't terribly important. The most important things are the job role. Well, the job role is important, but so are these things. So we need to actually flesh them out to the same level of detail as we do our KPIs for our job. So hopefully, Sarah, that's giving you an idea. It's not as difficult as it might seem, which is good, actually. All right, moving on. Now, I just wanted to make the point, and I could lead on from Saren's question there, that if you look at an organisation, the negative impact of a job description happens everywhere. Now, Saren was asking about interview as well. So if you think about it, at the recruitment and selection stage, if we're just asking questions around the job role, then what happens 3 months into the job when we find out they're a pain in the backside? All right, this is very common, as we know. They might have good technical skills, but they're a really difficult person to work with. In other words, their non-job roles aren't up to scratch. We need to craft questions around non-job roles. Now, obviously, if they're embedded in the work document, then it's going to be far easier to legitimise why you're asking people about their ability to work in a team, their ability to grow and develop as an individual, their ability to bring and inject new ideas into an organisation. We can ask those questions, and we should be asking those questions. And we should be asking them to give us some examples of when they've done it. Now, when we induct people, we normally show people where their desk is or their work area, and we talk about their job again, but we don't necessarily talk about non-job roles. So already in the early stages of someone's life in a workplace, they're already indoctrinated into believing that their whole work revolves around this job description. And then when we send people off to training and development, what we do is we send them off to technical programs, not saying they're not important, but by doing that, we are, again, bypassing the non-job roles I went through. And then when we remunerate people, we often do that on the basis of how effective they are at doing their non-job roles, their job roles, and very little emphasis is put on their non-job roles. So they're completely indoctrinated now into believing that they should just stick to what's on their job roles. And then, of course, when we promote people to management, how do we do that? We look at the best technical person in the place. That's how they get the job of manager. But yet the non-job roles are critically important to the success of management. And then when we review performance, we sit down and we just talk about job roles. You can see the problem in that. You can see how it can create a serious problem for your council if the whole emphasis is just on the left-hand side of that previous diagram I gave you. We need to develop a culture where non-job performance is critically important if you're serious about building strategic performance up in your organisation. Now, I'm just coming towards the end now, and I realise we've got about 10 minutes to go. I just wanted to say to you that one of the frameworks that I have engaged with many organisations, including a few councils, is the 5 Conversations framework. I'm proud to say that there are organisations all over the world, both in the public, private and not-for-profit sector, who are now taking on board my 5 Conversations framework. But I'm sharing this with you as a tool for you to start talking about non-job roles. So you can see that on the left-hand side, there's 5 months. So we're expecting that a person, a manager, a leader would have 5 short conversations with each of their direct reports once a month over a 5-month period. These conversations should not go for more than 15 minutes. Sometimes they do and sometimes they should, but they're designed to be short and sharp and to the point, and they're designed to encompass both non-job and job roles. So first up in month 1, we do a climate review. And what I think is interesting is that I don't know what you do in your local government organisation, but many organisations spend, thousands of dollars doing engagement surveys across the organisation, and the reports just gather dust somewhere and nobody gets to see the results, and people wonder why they're not getting a great take-up rate for people filling them out. And I wouldn't fill it out either if I didn't think anything would happen. So why don't we do that via conversation? Why do we have to do that via email? Why can't we sit down and talk to people about those things? And, the very first question that I recommend there is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your current job satisfaction? Person says 4. You say, okay, why? And they tell you, and you then say, well, do you think it's possible to get it from a 4 to a 6? And if so, what is it that I need to do to help you do that? These are the sort of constructive conversations that do increase performance that often don't get talked about. In month 2, instead of us talking about weaknesses, how about we talk about people's strengths? How about we talk about innate talents and how they can be best utilised in the current work that people do and future work? And because you're relatively senior in your organisation, you can do something about these strengths. You can deploy them in different ways, shapes and forms. Maybe not now, but certainly in the future. Then you've got to talk about opportunities for growth. And really, having those conversations is critically important because, there are things that people have got to work on. So we should be talking about those things throughout the year and not just save it up for the big performance review event at the end of the year. Out of conversation 2 and 3, there's probably some learning and development opportunities that have arisen, and that's what conversation 4 is about. So that's the learning and development conversation. And then in month 5, we have an innovation and continuous improvement conversation. Just imagine how exciting it would be if your whole organisation embraced the 5 Conversations framework, and that every single person in the month of September was having an innovation and continuous improvement conversation with their manager. That's exciting. There'd be some good ideas come out of it. There'd be some not so good either as well. But the truth of the matter is there would be some gems that would be easy to implement, wouldn't take up too many resources and would make a difference. And yet we don't have conversations with people about this, but yet we expect people to come to work with these things. So one of the ways you might like to consider this is to actually consider the 5 Conversations framework as a framework, but you don't have to use this, you can use anything. But the main thing is to get into a series of conversations with your direct reports and then encourage them to do the same thing with their people. And that's how we change culture. That's how we improve performance. Regular catch-ups, check-ins, whatever you want to call them. I always think it's interesting in local government that initiative is not something that's in abundance. Getting people to show initiative is not really all that, I'm sure you'd wish some of your people would show more initiative. And I think one of the reasons for that is what we call the initiative paradox. Now, the initiative paradox is a pretty straightforward concept. And that's this. As you see the diagram on the left-hand side, leaders want initiative from employees And interesting enough, employees want to display initiative. So everybody's on the same page at the beginning. Employees, surveys show, want to be able to think for themselves. So there's clearly both are in alignment at the beginning. But what happens is this, in the second rung there, the leaders invite initiative and the employees aren't sure that management is serious about that. So you might go into a meeting and say, I want you to show some initiative in this, and this area, and they sit on their hands and do nothing. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Your assumption is, oh, they don't want to show initiative. And because your assumption is they don't want to show initiative, you jump in and do it for them. And of course, they sit back then and think, I'm glad I sat on my hands. I knew my boss didn't really want me to show initiative. I'm glad I didn't do anything because there they are interfering again. It's like a dog chasing its tail. It can be entertained, but it never quite catches it. So this is what we call a paradox, an initiative paradox. So we need to have these conversations in order to get people to show more initiative and such. Whoop, I went too far there. So there are a number of other conversations you could be having with your team, and you should be having them, and I encourage you to do so. One of the last two on that list are critically important. You should be talking about the big picture. You should be explaining to people the why of work. You should be giving people a rationale of why they should be doing things a certain way. And you should also be encouraging people. People are fundamentally insecure. We all are. And we all occasionally from time to time need encouragement. You might be bulletproof, but I can assure you that a lot of your people have a lot of insecurities about whether they can do something or not. And they need to hear from you that you believe in them. And you don't have to do it in a soppy way. Just say, thank you for doing that job. You did a great job. You stepped up to the plate. That was wonderful. Or I know you can do this. I've got confidence in you. Sometimes just saying that can make all the difference. And I don't think we do enough of that in our workplace. All right. So that sums up where we've come to today. I've thrown a lot of things at you. Thank you for the questions. Of course, you can communicate with me anytime during the Lunch and Learn. You've got an opportunity to do that anytime at all. So by all means, come back to me and share your war stories or whatever. I'm more than happy to hear what those things are. Now, I do have some homework for you. We always got homework. If I can get it up on the screen, for some reason that's not working. Whoop. All right, that slide doesn't want to play for some reason. Okay. All right, there it is. Boy, I wonder what was going on there. Okay. I want you, as homework from now, to commit to a schedule of regular development conversations with your direct reports. I'd like you, if you're not already doing so, to engage in a monthly conversation, short and on development, not about tasks, not about projects, not about functional roles, but pretty much around the things that I shared with you today. These are the non-job roles. I want you to do this and you'll be amazed at the difference it'll make. If you're not sure what to talk about, use the 5 conversations framework I shared with you and just map it out that way. Ask people to come to the conversations prepared. I want you to do that. I think if you do that, you'll find great results that'll come out of it. You'll be surprised. Hang in there. The first one might be a bit strange if you haven't done it, but what you'll find is after a while, people will warm to it and actually enjoy that time and interaction with you, which is critically important. Now, that brings us pretty much to the end, and I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope that I've been able to perhaps spark some thought and interest for you as an executive around some of these important elements of performance. Next time we meet, we're going to be looking at the influencing capabilities. And remember, I'll be sending you out an email on Monday, and there'll be a link in there to complete a influencing capabilities profile. And then, of course, when we meet next time, we'll have a wonderful opportunity to be able to debrief you on your 14-page report. All right, so that's about it for me. Just got a comment here from Saren. Thanks, Tim. Always enjoy your sessions. You always leave me with plenty to think about. Thank you. That's very kind of you, Saren. I appreciate that. You never quite know sometimes how things are going to go across. Thanks, Dan. Good to be in contact with you again, and I'm looking forward to the series. Excellent. Thanks for the feedback. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good luck and get stuck into those conversations. Don't mess around. It will be an investment that's well worth making, and I think you'll find you'll get a tremendous amount out of it. So thank you, and at this stage I'll sign out. Thank you and goodbye.